Hey everybody, it's Matt Shares. Welcome to the SBI podcast. Our guest today is Steve Bonvissuto. Steve's the Executive Director of Innovation for MarketSource. This guy has 30 years of experience transforming strategy and translating into results for Fortune 500 companies. We're going to have a fascinating conversation around sales systems. I really think you're going to enjoy the show.
From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today, we're going to demonstrate how to improve the productivity rates of the sales team with smart sales systems design. So why this topic? Too much technology and reps never ever meet with customers because they become data entry clerks. Too little technology and they reps waste countless hours, administrative tasks that could have been automated. So you kind of think about revenue growth, it sits between these two extremes. My name is Matt Shares, I'm the CEO of SBI, and I will be your host. Joining me in the studio is my co-host, the marvelous Melissa Valdez. And Melissa's here to point you to the right resources to help advance you along the way to making your number.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me, and welcome to our listeners.
Fantastic. So joining us today is Steve Bonvissuto, who's the Executive Director of Innovation for MarketSource. So Steve, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself and MarketSource to the audience.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt and Melissa, for having me. I'm Steve Bonvissuto, and I'm in charge of innovation at MarketSource, and we are a sales outsourcing organization, and we have sold over $60 billion in products and services on behalf of our customers over the last year.
60 billion with a B. So, Steve, I got to tell you, I'm so pleased that you agreed to spend some time with us because everybody gets very excited about the latest and greatest technology tool. And they get, tool overload and they have a little overdose. So you and I, we're going to have some fun today. Before we jump into that, Melissa, I think the audience is going to want to follow along. So can you maybe give them a little guidance on how they can do that?
Yes, absolutely. If you are following along, please leverage the 2018 How to Make Your Number workbook. We will be in the sales strategy section today, phase 3 systems, and you can find that on page 417.
All right. So let's jump into the questions. So, Steve, I'm going to start sort of at a high level and we'll sort of work our way down almost like a sales funnel because lots of sort of card-carrying salespeople are not technologists, and you are one and you can translate the two. So we'll have some fun with that. So what are the most important objectives of a sales technology strategy?
Number one, Matt, is it's all about hitting the number. And so at MarketSource, when we engage with a customer, we sign up for quota, and when we overachieve, everybody wins. And so for us, it's all about hitting that variable attainment metric. So there's a kind of a fixed component and a variable component, and when we overachieve, customers are happy, our reps are happy, our company's happy. So it's a win all the way around.
Wow. Talk about loving your answer. As a card-carrying member of the sales fraternity for a couple of decades, I love the fact that you talked about hitting the number and driving a variable. But I guess to help people think about technology, so to what extent is technology changing sales performance, I guess at MarketSource's customers, knowing this sort of view that you all get and where you sit in the ecosystem?
That's a great question. We have a different view of sales enablement as we deploy for our customers. We look at it through 3 different lenses, Matt. So it's one lens is about the process in which people work, and that process has to be efficient and streamlined for any technology to be effective. And so we have business process engineers that actually go in and analyze what the current process is, and we eliminate wasteful steps. So we use a terminology here called green time, red time. We want those sales reps focused on the things that are going to drive the most productivity. The other part of it is skill and acumen. So we all have strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others, and so we assess our teams and identify where their gaps are and apply instructional design to increase their skill and acumen. And then finally, it's about technology. And so that's about making sure that we're as productive as we possibly can. We think in terms of a few different metrics: time, cost, quality, and count. So when we look at sales enablement technologies, are we increasing our productivity? Are we reducing time? Are we increasing quality?
Wow. So talk about a focused answer. So a little fun fact about Steve: he is a incredible athlete, Boston Marathon finisher. So you can tell the guy thinks in outcomes. Steve, I love green time, red time. So hopefully you are okay. I love to steal phrases. So I will be taking that along with me and going green time, red time, both with my kids and with my employees. So this is going to be good. So talk to me a little bit about, you talked about the enablement and this concept around the right metrics and skill and acumen. So how should the audience be thinking about using technology to enable the sales team? Like if you were keeping it basic for level 1 technologists that were listening to this podcast right now.
So, I think one of the most important things, Matt, is there's been this proliferation of technologies in the space like we haven't seen in a long, long time. And there's entrants coming into this thing every single week, and it's pretty easy to get confused. It's typical that we see customers in this analysis paralysis phase. And for us, it's all about learning. And so we look at where in the funnel are we trying to have an impact? Is it right. Top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel? Yeah. And then what is exactly we're trying to accomplish? Are we, increasing the skill or acumen? Are we using predictive? And so for us, we like this idea of failing fast and developing a use case and trying something quickly. Within 30 days, we can determine whether something fits in our environment or our customer environment. So for us, it's really about testing as many products as we can, developing those use cases and seeing what the outcome is.
So Steve, should I think about that if I'm a listener? Should I think about that? I mean, you described a very agile, sort of rapid iteration. I mean, prototyping to try to generate a use case. So I get that. If I'm an audience member and I'm saying, is it a technology solution or is it a business process solution? Because you all have to do both. When you walk in and take over these massive, massive sales teams of every big brand company there are out there, how should an audience member think about that?
I think primarily it's a business process issue that you want to resolve first, Matt. So if you think of most organizations, typically marketing and sales aren't necessarily aligned, right? So what you want to make sure is that when you're looking at the very top of the funnel and you're doing demand creation and you're using a technology, for example, to do lead scoring, it's not about the quality of the lead. What happens with the lead and that handoff to sales? And what are those service level agreements that you need to put in place between marketing and sales so that we know that the quality of leads is the right quality and we know that sales is performing the right function with those good leads, right? So that alignment's really important. And if it's not there, your technology spend can be wasteful.
I love the way you think about technology sitting in the ecosystem as opposed to solving the problem. So that was a great segment. We're going to take a quick break because Melissa's going to share a tool with the audience that they can leverage. So Melissa, turn it over to you.
Thanks to technology, SBI has been available to develop a great new tool called the Revenue Growth Diagnostic. So if you've received your target number for the year, you might be wondering how you're going to make the number. You can use this tool to evaluate your go-to-market strategy and see how you compare against market leaders in the industry.
Fantastic. Welcome back. This is the SBI Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Shares. Today's guest, Iron Man, Steve Bonvissuto, the Executive Director of Innovation for MarketSource and fellow inflictor of pain like myself relative to exercise. Steve and I, we run the exercise alcohol continuum where you just try to keep that teeter-totter level. So that's what we're talking about.
All about balance, right?
All about balance. So today, Steve and I are demonstrating how to improve the productivity rates of your sales team with smart sales systems design. And in the first segment, we talked a lot about technology and sort of diagnosing a situation and how you start to move quickly with the right piece of technology. So I guess, Steve, segue now. broad question yet again, what type of sales technology do you use at MarketSource, knowing that you probably seen, touched, tested every piece of technology that there is?
Well, I'm not sure that that's possible, Matt, because there are so many technologies out there. But we think we've done pretty well. We've got a pretty wide aperture in terms of what we look at. So I mentioned earlier, we like to understand where we're starting from. So one of the very first things that we do is make sure that that process by which the sales teams are performing is as streamlined as possible. Yeah. So we model the sales process, and then we build out sales playbooks so that our teams know exactly what they need to do and what that workflow looks like. Then we build that into our CRM. So in most organizations, Salesforce is used as a tool to record what happened. The way we like to use Salesforce is we set it up as a tool that allows our sales reps to determine what to do next with an account or with a series of prospects. And so we build that engineering workflow into Salesforce so that it becomes a tool that our reps really want to use. And then we do a sales assessment. We use a sales assessment technology where our sales reps go through a series of selling scenarios, and we get to understand what their selling skills are, and we even get to understand what their selling behavior is. Are they hunters or farmers? Do they have a fixed mindset versus an open mindset? Are they going to adapt any technology that you put in place? Because you need to understand where they're coming from. Then you build out a training curriculum that increases their skill and acumen in the areas where they're weak. Then you begin to look at tools that we use here, like InsideSales.com is a tool that we use to drive productivity and apply some analytics, those sorts of things. We coach. We've implemented a sales coaching tool that forces a sales manager to have a one-on-one coaching situation with a rep, and that's tied to Salesforce. And so these tools need to be integrated into your CRM in order to be most effective.
You know, Steve, I think the such a fascinating thing, and for the listeners, I mean, you think about sales outsourcing. I mean, Steve and his executive team drop a set of salespeople, where they're taking over the sales function, taking over the revenue engine, and in record time, get people onboarded and ramped. And you listen to Steve rip through the process around how they get that done. So as you're listening to this, while you might not be in the sales outsourcing business, you're in the sales business and you're trying to drive revenue to grow faster than your peers in your industry, that the model and the process with the way Steve articulated what they do from the process, playbooks, workflow, assessment, and then rapidly iterating along the way. So Steve, that was a fantastic demonstration. So I guess my next question would be, how do you think about utilization rates of the sales tech stack that you've invested in? And what sort of triggers tell you good utilization, moderate utilization, low utilization, time for a rip and replace?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is you need to think about this from whatever you deploy, it's really your starting point. And so you and I are both runners, Matt. And so, all this training that you do gets you to the starting line. Yeah. And then the gun goes off and you know what happens after that, right? Yes. So you've got to iterate. Yep. You have to iterate, right? So you assess the impact of the tools. Are you getting the utilization that you're looking for? Are your teams adopting it? That's where instructional designers come in, because they teach, adults learn differently. Yeah. We all learn either from seeing or from trying it ourselves or from reading. And so you need to understand how best to deploy those technologies and get folks to use them in a way where you can see those expected outcomes. And again, for us, it's all about time, count, quality, and cost.
So, I mean, Stephen, like super basic, I mean, those four metrics, and I'll have you say them again, that you just ripped off, to the novices or the novices plus one that are listening saying, oh my goodness, I've got like 9 different tools that have 20% utilization and this messy tech stack that looks like a spaghetti plate. Would those be the 4 components that you would say, hey, here's how you baseline yourself and make an informed decision relative to your tech stack?
I think they are. I'm not sure that I know of any other metrics to focus on, and that seems to work well in our organization and with our customers. And so you want to make sure that the quality of the leads that you're working is as high as you possibly can be, and that your data is accurate, right? So quality is super important. Time is important because you want to reduce the time to close on deals, right? And you want to increase, cost is important because you want to increase deal size. And so those are pretty basic metrics. It sounds more complicated than it really is, Matt. And for me, it's all around people, process, and technology. And so, streamline that process, make sure your people get the kind of training that they need. And it's like, I like to use the term, you're dipping them in the wax and making a candle. It's one of those things that you do over and over and over and over again, right? And all of a sudden you've got yourself a candle. And the technologies that you're deploying over time, as people use them, they're learning how best to use those tools. We like to use a term here called, we want to be great users of technology. And so for us, it's not about the technology, it's about being great users of technology.
Okay, so I guess last question in this segment then, Steve, what are the most challenging obstacles to sales tech success? Like, what's the big one that stands in the way, and how do you advise our audience to combat that?
I think it's two things. I think one thing is patience. A lot of companies think they can, these technologies are a silver bullet, and they're not. And the other is alignment. And so you need, when we engage with customers, we make sure that there's not a handoff, but there's a handshake. And so that alignment needs to be pretty tight. The last thing you want is somebody throwing something over the wall to somebody else, because technology isn't going to solve that problem for you.
Yeah. Fantastic. Another power-packed segment with Steve. So we're going to take another break, and Melissa is going to share some more goodness with you all. So, Melissa, what do we have?
Yes, absolutely. Well, if anything that Steve and Matt have discussed resonates with you out there, I invite our audience to schedule an interactive workshop with one of our subject matter experts here at SBI. We can help you solve your business challenges. You don't have to go at it alone. We can schedule a roll up your sleeves, get down and dirty, get in the trenches kind of workshop. And to get a feel for what's covered in this workshop, you can go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook. Thanks, Matt.
All right. So this is our last segment with Steve, demonstrating how to improve the productivity rates of the sales team with smart sales system design. It's for the audience, I hope you recognize, and we got very lucky to have Steve on the show, everything Steve's been talking about has been outcome-driven, productivity-driven. He has not geeked out on a piece of technology the entire show. He's been talking about outcomes, and he's been talking about what's driving productivity. So as you're driving down the road or standing in an airport lineup right now or sitting on the plane listening to the show, you have to ask yourself, am I being outcome-driven with our tech stack? And if not, why bother? You can reinvest those dollars and the time into hiring more heads to go do more. So, Steve, I think as we push into our final segment here, talk a little bit about the sales tech integration. To what extent are the sales technology systems integrated?
I think the key to top of the funnel all the way, if you think about the customer life cycle, Matt, all the way from creating demand to servicing a customer for life, your CRM is a key component of that. And when we engage with customers, the one thing we recognize right off the bat in almost every single situation is they haven't deployed the CRM in the right way. It's typically a one-size-fits-all deployment, and it's driven from the top down. And we believe in a very specialized sales approach and designing Salesforce in a way where it lines up with the work of each role in your sales process. And so if you're a hunter or a prospector, your tool has to be set up for frequent touch, what type of touch, that sort of thing. If you're an account manager or a farmer, the tool needs to be set up differently. And so you want Salesforce or your CRM to be a tool that your people want to use to do their job, and not one of those things that they need to do at the end of the day in order to get credit for an activity. And so I would suggest that most companies kind of look at their CRM and make sure that they're designing it in a way where it serves the needs of each individual role in the sales organization and in the marketing organization, and then bolt on tools that are going to serve each of the areas of the funnel. So predictive analytics on the front end, lead scoring tools on the front end, so that you have the highest possible quality leads and you're focusing on the right prospects and the right personas. So that's important for top of funnel.
Yep.
In terms of activity with customers, you want to make sure that you know when to call a customer or prospect, and more importantly, what the objective of that call is. Yep. And what you're trying to accomplish in that call. And so I would just look at the areas in the funnel where you are, top, middle, bottom, and then really focus on the people and their role and how to increase their skill and ability with these tools that you're looking at. What we found is for inside teams, it's productivity driven sort of stuff.
Yeah. For
field-based teams, it's what's really important is how they engage with customers eye to eye and the messaging. And we've deployed a lot of sales technologies that allow them to practice their pitch in a video and learn from others and get feedback from others on what works well and how they present the messaging.
Steve, I absolutely love that question. How does the CRM serve each role? That I have not heard it positioned that way. Like, I'm literally sitting here right now thinking about, we're a Salesforce shop, and I'm thinking about each of the roles in my firm and how each of the roles are using that. And I have a feeling that I might not be right on best practice, so I might have to schedule a workshop with myself to get myself going and implement what you've said. So that was fantastic. So is there another click around systems integration with those systems outside of sales, or do you think it's stay focused inside the sales tech stack and nail that? What's your point of view there?
Yeah, I think I would focus on both marketing and sales.
Yeah.
I think in terms of integrating with your back office systems, let's say order entry or fulfillment and that sort of thing, build that integration, from your CRM. So it's kind of got to be the hub of your organization and how you build. What you don't want, Matt, is people jumping from system to system to system, because there's a really good example of red time, green time, right?
Yeah, that would be too much red and not enough green. And I don't consider myself a painter, but even I could pull that together. So last question, which might be the most interesting one, and Steve, we've asked you some good ones. What is the best approach for the audience to determine the budget for sales technology?
I would start small, Matt. I think a lot of companies can spend an awful lot of money. If you think about the cost of a technology stack, so I had a customer call me recently and asked me what I thought the typical stack for an inside sales rep was, and the typical stack for a field-based sales rep was, and it's pretty significant when you factor in the cost of your CRM and other sales enablement technologies. So I would focus on tools, as I said before, I'd focus on making sure that your CRM is role-based and streamlined. Yep. And then I would look at, coaching sales reps and making sure that you do those one-on-ones, because that's really important. Again, I would say start small with the budget, only because what you really want to do is you want to try a lot of different tools, and you don't want to overanalyze. We love the term, learn from our mistakes and move on. And we don't want to be tied to any particular sales enablement technology that has a high cost to it, right, because we want to be very agile. And so try them out, test them. You don't have to invest a lot of money. We do pilots all the time with technology vendors, and that seems to work very well with us.
Well, and I think, what I'm hearing from you, instead of you saying, hey, for an inside sales rep, he's got to have 4 tools with an average seat of $39.99 a month, so you spend $200 an inside rep and $500 a field rep. What you're saying is think outcomes, look at the role, determine the tool, and then you've got to think about ROI relative to what's required to drive productivity. There's a couple core tenets you mentioned. CRM, everybody understands why. You've hit home around coaching, sort of that operating cadence. I'm a big believer. I grew up in a high coaching sales culture, the first decade of my sales career. So I agree with that. Man, Steve, that was an incredible demonstration on a topic that really paralyzes a lot of people. And I can't thank you enough just for the time and the thoughtfulness that you spent with us. So on behalf of the SBI audience, thanks very much. I appreciate it. And I thank our audience for tuning in. I appreciate your continued support. You have a choice where you put your ears and your eyes, and the fact that you'd spend a little time with myself and Melissa and Steve today, I'm grateful for that. So Steve, thank you very much.
Very welcome, Matt. Thank you.
All right, Melissa. So one more parting gift before we go.
That's right. Yes. Thank you, Steve, for joining us today. To our audience, if you haven't done so already, please go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/register. And there you can register for your SBI content experience. You can choose the topics of interest to you and when you would like to receive content regarding those topics.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for today. And as my good friend Steve said, green time, red time. May you have more green and less red. And as always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.